Hello, super friends, and welcome back to another episode of Superhero Saturday, where we talk about the arts of superheroes, storytelling, and so much more. My name is Annie, and this week we are continuing a little accidental series that I've started that is focused on the Enneagram personality typing system and various superheroes, or, as is the cake this week, supervillains. As a superhero author and a lifelong fan of the genre, I am kind of obsessed with using different personality typing systems to help with the analysis and generation of different types of superhero characters. That's why for this week and next week we are taking a little walk on the dark side and examining the different supervillain tropes and how they relate to different Enneagram types. So this week we are taking on DC, and then stay tuned for next week when we will be talking about Marvel. But first, in case you are new to this series, I'm going to give you all a quick little rundown and get us all on the same page before we dive on in to the world of supervillains. My personal favorite type of personality typing system is the Enneagram, and that's for a few different reasons. Firstly, it matches up perfectly with my own set of 9 superheroes called the Fearless 9. Didn't do that on purpose, by the way. The second is that the Enneagram is relatively simple for a personality typing system without being too shallow. It's really deep and rich in talking about different personality types and patterns of behavior. And finally, the Enneagram system is built on the idea of a person's core motivations, of their joys and their fears, of their systems of growth and their methods of coping with stress, all wrapped up in this really cool diagram that has 9 different main personality types and subtypes with cool nicknames and numbers associated with them. I'm a sucker for good graphics. My overarching belief with the Enneagram system is that no matter what type you are, you have the potential to become a superhero. But in this video, we're gonna talk about how you might just become a supervillain, so hold on to your seats. Because here comes the big disclaimer, this is all subjective science. These supervillains are differently represented in a whole variety of different mediums and different stories. So in the end, this is just a, pretty superfluous debate. It's just especially tricky when it comes to supervillains because I feel like not every supervillain is characterized the same way consistently, and there are a lot fewer stories per character than there are for, say, superheroes like Superman or Iron Man. So while one story a character might be one Enneagram type, in another story they might be a totally different one. So if you have examples, I totally want to hear them. Everything is subjective, and if you have a different idea about a different character, totally tell me about it because I love talking about this stuff and I think it's super interesting. Now that we've got all that out of the way, let's get into our DC Supervillain Enneagram. Let's start with Type 1, the Moral Perfectionists. As a Type 1 myself, I can totally see how people with this personality type could get suckered in by the dark side. Type 1s are characterized by their sense of right and wrong, and they typically have an exceedingly harsh inner critic that holds them to highest standards. Their sense of justice and self-righteousness makes Type 1s prime real estate for evil doing, especially if they believe deep down that what they're doing is the right thing, even though on the outside, it's really not. This type would produce supervillains who don't believe they're supervillains at all, and in fact might even see themselves as heroes or savior types. For our DC example, I picked Amanda Waller as our Type 1 supervillain. She believes that there is injustice in the world, and she's following through with the only way she sees fit to put things right. And while she's sometimes portrayed as a superhero or kind of a gray area between villain and hero, she is always doing what she thinks is right, no matter what. And it's this that I think makes her a Type 1. Type 2s on the Enneagram are known as the helper types, but don't let that fool you into thinking they can't be supervillains too. This type is known for their love of family and friends, and they would do anything to make the lives of their loved ones better. That can lead to some really interesting character arcs, with villains who are just doing what they can to provide for and protect these people they love. For our DC example, I've picked Mr. Freeze. He is so focused on doing what he can to save the woman he loves that he doesn't even always realize that what he's doing is impacting the lives of others, and perhaps not actually giving his wife the life that she deserves. But he is so focused on his core desire to help her that he can't see anything else. Type 3s are the archetypal supervillain trope. As the achiever type, their core motivation is to be the best at what they do, no matter what the cost. Supervillains like Syndrome from The Incredibles strive to make their mark on the world, to be heard, to be the ultimate version of whatever they hold to be valuable. Type 3s are also known to hide their weaknesses from the world, so another motivation for achiever supervillains might be to cover up the evil they have and pretend everything's still okay. Either way, it's not difficult to find supervillains in this type. I think our DC Type 3 supervillain is classically Lex Luthor, because he is always trying to be the absolute best and take over the world, basically, for his own gain. Type 4s are also a great foundation for supervillains. As the individualist type, Type 4s are intensely self-focused and often believe that they are absolutely unique and that no one else on Earth knows their pain and suffering. Villains of this subtype tend to try and be alone with their pain, but are also completely given over to their emotional whims. Just remember that if you're creating your own supervillain, don't use this as an excuse to use the fridge motivation for them. Killing off someone's significant other doesn't mean they'll automatically become a broody Type 4 criminal. For our DC example, I have chosen Poison Ivy because, again, she is fighting for something that she holds very dear, but she is so focused on her internal battle and her retreat with her plants that she is often not really focused on world domination as much as she is on just fighting for her own particular heart. Next up are the Type 5s, which are known as the Investigators. Because of their deep curiosity, they often become the evil genius supervillain trope, which is extraordinarily common. But it's easy to see why it's such a classic. When Type 5s devote themselves to the pursuit of knowledge, they tend to forget that anything else exists, whether other people, other cultures, other universes, or anything outside of the brain and the data. This unrelenting curiosity leads them to push the boundaries of reality just for the sake of seeing what happens. Our DC Type 5 supervillain is Brainiac, because his whole thing is that, well, he's a supercomputer, so he needs to find out every little bit of information in the universe and internalize it into his computer database. There is really no right or wrong, there is only the search for more information. Type 6s actually make for really interesting supervillains, and it was a challenge for me to find some good concrete examples, but I think I've got it figured out. Type 6s are devoted to their people and their cause, and are generally very personable, charismatic, and gregarious. As far as supervillains go, these are the ones who either follow a misleading cause but will never betray it, or get lots of people to follow them down the road to the dark side. That's why you more often see Type 6s being the devoted sidekick to a bigger bad guy. But if you find a supervillain Type 6 on their own, they're actually pretty hardcore. Our DC Type 6 supervillain is Sinestro, which is actually really cool because Type 6s are also known for their fear, and Sinestro, who was originally loyal to the Green Lantern Corps and then was dishonorably discharged, gave into his sense of fear and decided to continue his own path of following that idea of the Green Lantern Corps on his own. Type 7s are known as the Enthusiasts, but for our categorization of supervillains, I'd say they are the agents of chaos. Type 7s are hugely motivated by experience, and they seek out a good time in whatever fashion it might present itself, which makes their slide into chaotic evil all too easy. The best DC example for this is obviously the Joker, as his whole shtick is based around spontaneity and insanity, and breaking any rule he comes across. He does exactly what he wants when he wants, and he only sticks around if he's having a good time. Type 8s are another obvious supervillain personality type. As the challengers, Type 8s are generally the most assertive or even aggressive of the Enneagram, and they go all out for whatever they choose to do. Fighters, rebels, warriors, and more find their spot on the Enneagram diagram at Type 8. For our DC example, I have chosen Bane, because he's all about strength and masculinity. Whatever his chaotic upbringing, he really just wants to do only what he wants to do, which is not necessarily evil all the time, but merely benefits his own interests for his own life. You don't see Bane trying to take over the world like Lex Luthor, after all. Type 9 is an odd place to end, especially after the hard-hitting Type 8s, but it's not an unusual place for a supervillain to land. Known as the Peacekeepers, Type 9s prefer to stay in their comfort zone, so they'll do whatever it takes if that means they get to be left alone. This makes them low-hanging fruit to become supervillains who aren't so interested in taking over the world as they are in creating their own little hiding spot. On the other hand, this type also tends to be very interested in the aesthetic, so low-level theme villains gravitate toward this personality type a lot. The first DC character that came to my mind with this one was the Penguin. He basically has the one thing, and he sticks to it, and the only time he's ever really a public nuisance is when he's doing something for himself, and it causes trouble for other people. In the end, he just honestly wants to be left alone with his flock of penguins. Weirdo. So there you have it, one giant list of all of the Enneagram types as supervillains and our examples from the DC universe. Did I miss any supervillains that would really fit in these characters, or do you have examples that maybe present stronger as different personality types than I gave them? Go ahead and hop down to the comments below and join in the conversation there. Thanks so much for watching, Super Friends. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give us a big thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see more superheroic or supervillainous content every single Saturday. You can join the team by following us on social media or supporting us on Patreon. And if you want to see my own superhero content, go to our website at www.fearless9.com to see what type of supervillains I have to offer. Thanks again for watching, Super Friends, and we'll see you next week.